For those of my listeners like Joe Radke who have been tuning in from episode 1, this is going to be a throwback. And I hope that you enjoy reflecting on it if you've heard it before. Many of you listening to TRBM now have not gone deep enough into the archives to hear episode 1. But something struck me this week as I was racing for a deadline to get some writing materials submitted, and that was that the origins of TRBM were there from episode 1, maybe more so than they were for the whole next year that I did the podcast. Many of you will know that this started out as a show called Create, Collaborate, with a really goofy spelling. I did just about everything wrong that a podcaster could do wrong to start with, and I learned on the fly. But the genesis behind Create, Collaborate was great, and it is more like what the show is now than what it was during the first year of exploration and trying to figure out my voice and who I wanted to talk to and the kind of people that I wanted to gravitate to this show. So what I'm doing is I am bringing you back all the way to episode 1 with my friend, Shawn Blagg. He and I work together. You'll hear a lot of that in the introduction to the episode. Pardon some of the production because I also learned how to produce sound a lot better and get quality audio in there. But I think it's a lot of fun. Everything is very listenable. And Shawn's story is still a real banger. It is a great idea for a story. And I would love to see somebody take it and run with it in some way, although all of the licensing and the story properties, maybe with some of the different things, might be challenging. Or, wait a moment, am I thinking about the extended conversation where we talk about different DC comics? Either way, he talks about his graphic novel Epic and the idea behind it. I think you're going to love it. Before we jump in, let me ask you, if you haven't bought a copy of The 9 Lives of Marvin DeLonghi, it's the first book in my 9-book series, The Luke and Time Mysteries, go ahead and grab one. I'll have links in the show notes. If you own a copy and you have read it, now is the time to drop a rating and a review. I know I ask every episode, but I guess that's just something you're going to have to get used to until I see all those ratings and reviews starting to drop. Hope you're enjoying the book. I know that not everybody reads at the same pace that I do, but feel free, if you're halfway through and you're loving what you're reading, just be honest in your rating and review. Drop it right now. Be like, I'm halfway through. This book is amazing so far. Can't wait to finish it. Those kind of things are transparent on Amazon. Everybody sees them, but they still help the algorithm. So if you're holding off till the end, I encourage you, don't worry about it. It's okay. Go ahead and put that rating and review. There's nothing ethically wrong about it. You're just helping me sooner. Remember, I spend money to get this book out to strangers. And so every single bit of social proof that I can add to The 9 Lives of Marvin DeLonghi is something that can help me feed my children. They're almost starving and they're growing boys. So, hopefully you can see the film playing in your mind of these just starving, trembling children that are almost skin and bones needing your help with a rating and review. Now, without further ado, please enjoy episode 1 of TRBM, all the way back when it was called Create, Collaborate.
Create.
Discipline.
Create. Collaborate.
Create. Surprise.
Create.
Collaborate.
This is Create, Collaborate. My name's Jody Sperling, and I'm your host. This week's episode was with an old friend and colleague. His name's Shawn Blagg, and he's one of the funnier, further out there gentlemen that I ever had the opportunity to work with. I can't remember a time that I ever showed up to a convenience store where we were putting in sunglasses and work gloves and cowboy hats, all the kinds of things that you can find at a gas station these days, when he didn't have some kind of joke that really balanced on the border of, dare I say, unprofessional. And I think that you'll really get a flavor of his outlook on life as you listen to this episode. He's a guy who has come through some really difficult times, learned some valuable lessons, and isn't afraid to speak his mind. It was really a privilege to speak with Shawn about his story idea. We used to touch on the fact that he had tons of ideas that he hoped someday to publish, but just hadn't gotten around to writing them. Maybe he felt he didn't have the artistic capability to draw what he wanted to bring life to and hadn't found anybody who could. So just keep in mind, if you're listening in and you are an artist and have a love for graphic novels and comic books, if you like the story, Shawn would definitely love to connect with you, and maybe you can get something started here. That's what Create Collaborate's all about. It's about finding people who have stories and maybe just not everything that they need to get those stories out to the world. And I hope that this podcast can be a little piece of maybe that dream coming true for Shawn. Do keep in mind, there is adult language in this particular episode, so if you're sensitive to that, be warned. I hope you won't miss out on it just because of a few curse words. Shawn has amazing perspective on life, on art. And yes, this is a fairly early episode. I'm reflecting back on my questioning and my hosting abilities, and especially early on in the episode, I think I gave him a fairly leading question, a couple of them, in fact. He rolled with it like a professional. So if you're going to critique anybody, please critique me for leading the witness, as you might say, and I really hope you enjoy. If you do, please don't forget to like and share the podcast on any platform that you're listening to it. Those early likes, those early shares, those early reviews really help to get this podcast out to more people.
Personally, I just got into therapy, so
Okay.
That's very nice. Just getting myself kind of together to make a good change and move.
Okay, so Shawn Blagg is in therapy. Is that like are you going and sitting down with somebody, or are you doing something via the phone?
Yeah.
What's it look like?
Oh no, it's sit down, talk to a person, and hash out the details of the universe and whatever, and just talk to somebody. It's been a long 2 years, and I just need I need that.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been a long 2 years. It like something about COVID made just time like sliced differently. The way that time passes is so different. It's hard to even describe.
We our generation and even our parents' generation really didn't experience major disease like this. Like we had the AIDS scare, but that was like almost like it was almost removed. Like all the sexual stuff is like almost like you could almost like point and say, well, you have to do something to catch that. This is like the first time that we've had to face something like this that was like, imminent, even if it wasn't imminent. However you believe, whatever, it's like, first time that we've done this as a generation. So it's interesting to see how it all, turns out.
The only thing you have to do to get COVID is just walk out of your door, pretty much.
Yeah. You just got to talk to people. Really. It's really, you have to talk to people. You have to be around other people. You have to socialize. And it's hard to not do that when you're fucking human. It's like even antisocial people still want to socialize.
Yep. Absolutely. You need it. It's not like it's something that only extroverts do. Even introverts want to socialize. It's just a different way that we want to do it. I mean, because I'm gathering you're an introvert. I'm an introvert. I really like this one-on-one setting.
I'd say I'm a bit more extroverted than I am introverted.
Okay.
Like I don't know. I like to be around people way more than I would like. Like maybe if I'm an introvert, I'm 100% aware of it and do things to not be introverted.
Okay.
Consciously.
Okay. So you prioritize that kind of extroverted, like get out there, have that community, have that relationship kind of a mentality. It seems like the better road to you.
Yeah. I know I have to talk to people. If I don't, then, there's a part missing, piece missing to me. So, yeah. And that's really what I missed in the past year past couple years is just talking to random awesome people.
Absolutely. That's kind of a good segue. One of the things about why we're doing the podcast today is that Create Collaborate is about, not celebrities, people who are doing kind of the everyday gig, people who have stories that they want to tell. I guess, tell me in a nutshell what you do, what you've been doing as work. I mean, work is a really important part of how we get here, how we shape our stories. Obviously, I know, but people listening in don't know what you do for work, and give your own spin to it.
Well, I spent about 5 years, the past 5 years, traveling and doing route work, which is just basically merchandising for electronics and sunglasses. And I've been kind of specializing in putting out fires for the company, of just running around and finding the issues in a problem routes and taking care of those routes, trying to make sure that those things were squared away, and trying to excel in that situation, being I guess a Da Vinci for the or a Renaissance man for the company, where you could put me in any situation and I'll take care of the issue.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do for a while. The past year, I decided to take a I don't know, the pandemic made a big change, and I saw an opportunity to work at home for a while. So I did. I took a route in Cincinnati, Ohio, and worked the past year doing the same stuff just for a single route. My son turned 18 literally 2 weeks ago.
Amazing.
So, yeah, I just wanted to be there for all that, be there for him for his, last year football, last year high school, making a lot of decisions. So I don't want to be on the road for him. I want to be home and hang out and do stuff. So, there we are. That was the past, literally like 6 years of just doing this route stuff. But before that, I worked at a comic book shop.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I work. My friend owns a comic shop here in Newport called Arcadian Comics and Games. I worked at his shop for 7 years from the day it opened, and God, I loved it. That's you absorb a lot of comic books.
Yeah. Now, we've talked a lot, and I mean, you have a love for comics. Did that start then, or I mean, how deep is the love for comics, graphic novels, that kind of, I guess, media or entertainment?
I can trace it even probably back to my uncle. My uncle Chuck and his friend Jason had a pretty awesome comic collection when I was a kid. And that's where I remember just the first time seeing those kind of like things out and like, oh, these are pretty awesome. And then when I was maybe 10 or 11 or 12, had that allowance and saw a issue on the newsstand, Amazing Spider-Man number 365 with a holographic cover. Was like, well, I need to fucking own that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and from there it just was like, well, I'll try to find Spider-Man and continue the story, because it's a continuing story in those books, and it was like, well, I'll start running down issues of this and figure out how to do this, and you discover a whole universe there of like, oh wow, it wasn't just this comic book, and isn't it just one book each time? It's like, all these things are interconnected, and just a fun bit of it, But yeah, I collected as a kid and fell out of it for a little bit, and then when I got out of school again, after going to tech school, I discovered books again. I just started collecting again, found a shop and couldn't put them back down.
What do you think it is? So I've noticed that, and this is the case for me too. I'm not into comics and graphic novels at the level that you are, but it's something that's always fascinated me. And I found in the past couple of years, I've really sought it out a lot. What is it about Spider-Man specifically? Because sometimes it seems weird to me. He's not necessarily the most powerful comic book hero out there. He's not the coolest guy. He has a cool outfit. I'll give him that. But in a lot of ways,
So,
I don't know. There's just something about him that's so like vulnerable, and maybe that is it. But for you, what is it that
so
Spider-Man hooked you?
okay, it definitely so costume is a huge part of this, of what
Okay.
like what people don't know, of like the genius of the Spider-Man costume is that it is eye-catching, that
Yeah.
it is like, this sleek human form that has a great costume, even and especially the black costume, whatever, it's
Hmm.
just like it accentuates this idea of that human form. But that's the eye pop part of it. But the story part of it is he's like an everyman with superpowers. It's like just an everyday dude with superpowers. He's one of the best depictions of just a regular everyday guy who just happens to have, the powers of a spider, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and Marvel is an amazing force of marketing, you know? Like Spider-Man's face is on so many different just actual issues of Marvel Comics, where you would find a little Spider-Man logo down at the bottom corner of a book that has nothing to do with Spider-Man. It just was on there, or you know, I mean, all the different Marvel properties that have a little bit of Spider-Man in it. It's a smart character, man. It's um really a smart character. It's the mix between tragedy, that just like that real powerful punches of tragedy that he has in his story that come up like regularly and are kind of ingrained into the character. Um, and just humor that he deals with it. I mean, that's a really human way of dealing with stuff. Is that he has this humor about him, tries to keep a bright spirit about it, even though he is surrounded by all this just horrible things happening. So
It's an interesting point you bring up. And there's so many different directions I want to go with what you said, but you kind of landed on humor. And that to me is this thing. I feel like we're missing it a little bit right now in culture is there's not a lot of humor. And I know that you specifically have been working a little bit on stand up. What do you think it is right now? If you look on the mainline media, there's not a ton of humor. We're not dealing with life humorously. We're not dealing with COVID humorously. What are your thoughts? I mean, if you have any, if you don't, you can completely
yeah,
pass on that.
we're I think as a nation, and there's a maybe not as a nation. I don't know. That's so hyperbolic. It's
Yeah.
I think really straight up there is an untold number of people in this country right now who are dealing with PTSD and they just don't realize it. They're dealing with a certain type or certain level of just this, post stress. I mean, of everything that we've just dealt with. Like you said, it kind of does come back to just, we dealt with something really just wild. A lot of people lost family, man. A lot of people lost family that we just, that it kind of is almost wildly, almost swept under the rug. Like nobody's even like talking. Like we just lost 500,000 people, dude,
Yeah.
and nobody's saying a word. Like it doesn't feel like anybody's talking about it, you know.
And
And I think that,
it's hard to laugh through that. Is I think that's kind of where you're going.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely that. That it's people are like, I mean, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know, man. I think comedy is actually like kind of coming into a different world of I mean, it's still out there, It's just it's not even it's still there, It's like it's just, there are some things that just people are like, well, man, that's just not that funny right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, the style of comedy and the things that people are going to laugh at is kind of just changing at the time. Like the shit that people laughed at in the 50s is not the same shit that we laugh at now. The pacing of comedy changes. So it's just a natural part of that change. And hell, man, it's really, like I said, we're barely a year out of this. We're not even really out of it yet.
No.
Who knows? Could be in the fucking next fucking roll of it. Ooh. But I don't know. I think individually there is enough gallows humor going around that we just don't need it on our face, after work or, on TV or whatever. A lot of people, I think, are looking for an escape from everything. And I don't think they're finding that escape in laughing directly about,
Sure.
So much of recent comedy of like the past 10 years of comedy feels like it was built on, examining society and examining, our foibles and all that fun stuff,
mm-hmm.
or whatever. And people don't feel like fucking dealing with that right now. They want pure escapism, like something to just get out of it and be like, yeah, no, okay, I don't want to really deal with that. Just tell me something about a fucking, tell me fart and dick jokes. You know what I mean? Like, because, I don't need to hear a joke about Trump. I just want to hear a dick and fart joke.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I've heard it spoken that way, but I think that's true. I think I noticed myself gravitating that way a little bit more than I used to. I certainly the political division right now makes it really difficult to take that on. You've got to be a certain kind of person to do that well enough that everybody feels comfortable.
I mean, it's just, it almost feels like you'll piss off somebody no matter what you say, unless it's just purely silly.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And maybe that's okay. Maybe it's okay to piss some people off. I'm not really sure. I kind of deal with that. And I wonder, even in the act of creating this, which there's kind of like a meta feeling to this whole podcast, which is like, we're talking about stories and we're telling stories and we want people to connect to the stories we're telling. And so just that sense of like, can I connect with you? And can I get you right to the edge of feeling frustrated with what I might be about to say? And then walk you back, and we realize we're all human. We're all telling these stories for a reason. I don't know.
Yeah. Like I said, when it comes to comedy, once again, I just don't feel like the audience is there for it right now to just deal with shit. All they want to do is laugh. They don't want to think. They don't want to fucking break down how smart that fucking joke was. They just want to be like, dicks. Oh, yeah.
I love that, man. It's almost the worst transition in the world, but I have this one thing. I've had this in my email inbox for a little while, and I want your take on it. If you've got nothing to say, just say you pass, and then we'll move on from there. But this has been in my inbox, and it's frustrating because I'm like, how do I handle it? I have a take. I have a thought process about it, so I don't want to influence yours, but I just want to read it to you. Okay, it says,
yeah, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Yeah. Dear Jody, I'll just come right out and say it. We are at risk of losing our most humble and impactful literary institutions. Literary journals are the rigorous proving grounds that early career writers need. We gain experience and critical credibility in their pages, which often goes a long way when we look to find agents or publish our first books. But if literary journals don't get the support we need from readers, from writers, from donors, and yes, from larger institutions, the decline may be slow, but American letters will fall from excellence. Our work will not be read. I'm just going to stop there, and I'm interested to hear your take.
Okay. Have you ever written to a literary journal or anything like that? Because I feel, my personal view of them, my experience of them is like, oh yeah, there are a lot of scams. A lot of them are just kind of like, almost like Ponzi level scams of just like, yeah, we'll get you to put, like, basically the only people that they're selling the book to is you. You
Yeah.
know, they're like, oh yeah, we'll sell you a book, and or we'll put your stuff in a book. All you got to do is buy it.
Yeah, it's almost like vanity publishing, except you have
Yeah.
to.
So I mean, yeah, I mean, if you got like 100 fucking people who buy a poem book, I guess, or buy 50 copies of a poem book and want to say like, look, dude, my fucking book's in a poem, my poem's in a book. You know, like, yeah, it works, but I don't know. It's a pipe dream, and I think it satisfies some things for some people. You know,
Yeah.
it's definitely. I just feel like there's a lot of like scammery in there, of like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we're just kind of weirdly scammery. I like there's very independent people who do very independent zines and stuff like that, where I'm like, okay, that sounds like a much more fucking cool thing. Where it's like if you're talking to like an actual single person who's like, no, I just do this book and looking for some people to put some stuff into it. That feels real, as opposed to like this fucking weird company who's basically already kind of soliciting you for cash,
Yeah.
I mean, that comes across as more of a sales pitch than it does a like pitch to get fucking people to write shit for them.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah. And honestly, we're in a different fucking world now, man. It's like, I don't think book sales is going to be the fucking thing that like, or fucking whatever magazine sales. The fuck do you sell a magazine or a literary fucking thing now? I mean, it's just like everything's available online, and nobody wants to buy any of that except for comic books, which I mean, just to bring it back around.
Yeah.
Because of all the literary pieces right now, like, yeah, sure, people buy books to read whatever, but a lot of that stuff happens online,
Right.
buy online versions of it. The only physical forms of stuff that still are really just like that are going to sell in major numbers is comic books, because of the collectability of it, because people want to collect comic books,
Right.
and they have a collectability of it. You can still see and place value on it on books that just came out 5 years ago,
Yep.
and stuff that just explodes, So I don't see that industry, like I see it changing in very big ways right now, but I don't see it disappearing the way that those kind of literary magazines are going to disappear. Because I don't think, I mean, the internet's too easy as a platform to put your stuff out. Nobody's itching for that anymore. It's like, yeah, I can make 17 blogs.
Yeah.
And probably do better, get more viewers than that one book.
I love that you say that. And I mean, I don't really want to infuse my opinion on this because I really think it's all about you. But I think that you make a really interesting point that what you're saying is that self-published people are not complaining about the state of publishing right now.
Oh, yeah. I don't think they are. I mean, I don't know. I think it's just, I'm sure they're dealing with paper shortages right now is a huge issue.
Yeah.
And ink and actual like physical parts of it. Cause that's prices for that is just skyrocketing. That like the price to actually self-publish is just going up and up and up. But I think that's their complaint against it, of like, yeah, but there's still a market for it everywhere. There's still plenty of places that are kind of, and people who are dying for that stuff, who are like, no, I definitely want a book. I want to read, like I said, particularly comics or whatever, or graphic stuff, because of like I said, the collectability and the tactile nature of that.
Hi, my name is JP Valier. I am the author of the dystopian novel, The Ketchup Factory. Here's a quick description from the back cover. Benji works for one of the most sought-after companies on Earth, Not only is there a sense of solidarity and devotion among factory employees, the workers themselves have the satisfaction of producing affordable nutrition, which has the added benefit of bringing peace and happiness to the country's citizens. However, the main ingredient has sadistic demands. Dignified blood sacrifices are not only accepted, but encouraged by society's leaders. Through a series of unfortunate happenstances, Benji navigates through a world convinced it is just. But in time, questions mount, confusion erupts, leaving Benji to roam in a dark forest with a head full of talking bugs, and a heart longing for a woman from his past. Here are what the critics are saying. Richard Russo, the winner of the 2002 Pulitzer Prize for Fiction, said, "JP's voice really got under my skin." Another Pulitzer Prize winner, Paul Harding, author of the novel Tinker, said, "Prose is fantastic, deft, sharp, detailed, high resolution." The Edgar Allan Poe-inspired literary journal, Ligeia Magazine, states, "Despite going over dystopian territory, I can't think of anything the Ketchup Factory sounds or feels like." If you're into surreal dystopian love stories, go check out my website, jpvalier.com, or find The Ketchup Factory on Amazon. It's currently available in print and ebook. Thank you.
So, comic books.
Yeah.
You have a story, and you're going to want to talk to us a little bit about your story. It's from what we briefly talked about offline. You want to talk about kind of a graphic novel well, anyways, you want to talk about a graphic novel idea you have. Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I could say I've got several graphic novel ideas that I'd love to talk and shoot around. But the one that I mainly want to focus on is a idea that's been rolling around in my head. I call it EPIC, lowercase EPIC with a very simple period. It's a story that focuses on a regular schlubby guy, glasses, kind of I don't know, you're like average office worker kind of looking guy, that's working in an office, and he has lost his memory, and that's where you start. Is that he's trying to figure out who he is, but not just who he is, but how to reconnect with people again, where he's not just lost his memory of his past, but also his kind of memory of how to connect with people.
Wow. Okay. So, really strange question. I just saw the new preview for the newest Matrix movie. It almost has that flavor. Do you feel like they robbed you, or is it different enough? Okay.
This is very different.
Okay. Because I'm thinking Mr. Anderson, office worker, but then I'm thinking about him post everything, and he's like, "Who the hell am I?" Okay.
This begins with a scene of a dark entrance to a cave, right? And then a flash of light flashes across the entrance of the cave, and then a fire outside the cave starts to glow. Wherein the whole time, all you see is just the same kind of entrance to the cave as it gets brighter and brighter, and then the fire gets closer, and the animals inside start waking up. The creatures inside start waking up. And then that's when you flip next page is the guy, our main character, BC, Ben Crawford, wakes up. And he's in an office, and he has it's a basement office. He's a regular dude, and he has a Post-it note telling him to look in his pocket. And he starts following these Post-it notes that have different directions on them, right? Um, all the directions aren't written on English. They're written in like there's different languages that the directions are written on, different post-it notes, and the ones that he keeps keying on are basic pictographs of people just like basic like original like caveman fucking pictograph. You know what I mean?
Interesting. Okay.
It eventually gets him to a path to get to his home, and there he breaks down what's going on. He's lost his memory, and every so often a traumatic event or something happens that makes him lose everything. He doesn't have any memory past 5 years. There's journals that are there that have recorded the past 5 years. And as he's starting to break stuff down, he starts, checking out all these things. But also, he goes back to work too, goes back to the place that he started at. And because that's part of the directions for him is to like, hey, keep going back to this place. This is how you make money. This is how you fucking survive.
Interesting. So what you're saying is like he's almost getting instructions on how to be, quote unquote, himself.
Exactly. He's getting instructions from himself on how to be himself, but he doesn't know who he is. And that's him as he goes, is trying to reconnect with people and understand, how these human interactions work. Part of the first arc is he finds a dog, and he starts really connecting with this dog. And throughout the first episode, the first couple issues, he actually doesn't talk. There's no speech from him until he finds this dog, and he kind of unloads on this dog of all right, so this is what's been going on. But the kind of unspoken secret of this guy is that there's a small sci-fi edge to this. It's not the important edge to it. It's just a fun storytelling device. He is immortal and has lived since the beginning of time.
Okay.
So he's been losing his but you won't know that as a reader. It's nothing that's said explicitly as you're reading this book. It's just something that's implied through dreams, and over time is kind of the thing that is given up to the reader, is that that he's actually lived all of these different wild lives. And the way that you see that is that there's two different styles to the book, is what I want to do.
Okay.
What I want to do is there's a very paneled out way of doing comic books of classically Jack Kirby and the old Spider-Man comic books. Those original things would be 9 and 12 panel books, where it'd just be 9 panels on a page, and every page would be 9 panels. And then you'd have some splash pages or some 2-panel pages, and that'd be a big thing. But I like the idea of that as in the normal waking world, doing it as panels, and where he does, where you get these his very structured paneled life of just mechanically figuring out the universe again. In his dreams, where you get to explore whatever, you can do a much more flowing different type of art style, where say, I think this is a good example. This is a guy called Chris Ware, right? This is a very paneled out geographic, or not, paneled out, angled, very simple shapes,
Right. There's no variation. You've got 6 windows, at least what I can see. You've got 6 windows. Okay. And then you've kind of got that bottom almost strip of film or something like that.
But easy, very handled narrative. Now, for the dream sequences, I would want to have something more and these are mine, by the way, amazing artists that I would never ever be able to find or afford. But this is a guy, J.H. Williams, who does stuff where the panels bleed into each other, where you get whole pages of just, where the books are almost the art itself. And almost a storytelling piece of it. In fact, a very pertinent version of this does a book with Neil Gaiman called Sandman Overture. It's the final or the last chapter of Sandman. I think this is a great page. Is all the panels are teeth. You know, when you back away, that's clearly a mouth.
Oh, that's wild.
But yeah, so you could tell some very cool stories in that. And I like the idea of where, like, in this waking world, you have those paneled out story. And then in the dream world, you can just explore whatever art style you like. You know, go with it and really extrapolate out. But the stories I want to tell in the dream world are the stories of his past, where you can explore his entire history and different segments of his history as it relates to the stories that are going on in his current life. Like for this first arc is he discovers a dog and kind of breaks down to the dog of, like, you know, what he's going through. While in his dream life, you see his discovery of, like, almost like the first kind of proto dog of him being a caveman and how cavemen kind of came to get these animals and domesticate these animals.
It's kind of fascinating because a couple of things. One, before you actually brought up Neil Gaiman, I was kind of thinking about American Gods. I feel like there's a slight connection in this amnesia piece again with American Gods. It's been long enough since I've read that book, but the main character has that feeling of amnesia. Like, I've been here, I've done this, I've discovered this, and yet, like, he's learning it over again. And that's part of what you're bringing here. So you can see that influence. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe your influence isn't there, but that's kind of how it's reading to me. And
oh, certainly. Yeah. I wouldn't say that particular story, but yeah, Neil Gaiman definitely, you know, his storytelling definitely throws an influence on me. The pieces I'm thinking of are, especially with the kind of the memory loss and the, you know, the lives lived over is, and as wild as this is Highlander.
Okay.
You know, like, I like the idea of, like, that Highlander piece. Like, I keep flashing back to, like, episodes of Highlander, the series, and like, of like, there's great episodes of them, like, flashing back and forth to them doing different time periods, you know, and the character is vaguely aware of those things that happened to him in the past in some reason or some way, you know, something makes him remember those things. I don't want my character to ever worry or even think about those things that happened in the past. My whole drive of this book is, I think the sci-fi part of it and the, like, him having this kind of, like, you know, weird secret about him, this kind of weird thing that, you know, whatever, it's a fun storytelling device. The story I want to tell is his connection to humanity, is him of a man trying to reconnect to, you know, to humans, to, like, you know, going on there, like, of how do you talk to people, you know, like, not just, like, you know, like, speak, but how do you talk to people and not destroy them, not offend them, not fucking make them mad, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I like the idea of exploring somebody who doesn't, you know, basically an infant in a 40-year-old's body.
I love it. That's so, it's a wild idea. It's a really fun idea.
Or maybe, I guess, really a caveman in a 40-year-old's body. It's just a caveman in a modern man's body.
He's got to completely learn, like, all of language and technology and modern etiquette at the same time, almost.
Well, I think some of the fun of it is that I can break rules and be like, well, he doesn't have to necessarily lose. Part of the rules of it is he can retain pieces. Like, he remembers all languages. Like, any language he ever learns, he remembers that language.
Okay.
But he doesn't know that he remembers it. But if somebody talks to him in another language, he knows what they're saying. Like, he doesn't, like, know, like, oh, I know Spanish. It's just if somebody speaks Spanish, he recognizes what they say if he's learned that language. But his own language, his own, like, thought language, when you do thought bubbles, is going to be all in caveman pictograph.
Interesting. Okay. So how do you get the actual text in there for the reader, or is it so, like, sparingly done that you can actually understand the pictographs.
Yeah. I mean, it's just basic stickman figure stuff.
Golly, that is a huge task. And I mean, if you pulled that off, nobody's done anything like that I've found before.
I think it's easier than easier said than, or maybe, I don't know. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Like it's, we already do it with the emojis.
Yeah.
You know,
yep.
Like baby emojis is basically pictographs. So, I mean, yep. I don't see how you wouldn't be like, I think you could caveman up emojis. And then,
I think that's true. And I think that there's like this huge, still uncharted, undiscovered territory right now where, and just kind of travel with me for a second, because you've got the laughy face that's crying tears and it's straight. So, it's looking at you and its face is oriented straight at you. And then you've got the one that's tilted and it's basically the same, but it's tilted. And I interpret those emojis a little bit different. Like for me, the one that's straight is slightly less hilarious than the one that's turned. So I don't use the turned one. Yeah, exactly. But my wife, she thinks that they're crying. That's not actually true. My grandma thinks that they're crying. I don't know. But, I mean, like there is this level of interpretation to pictures. You're basically doing a graphic novel, a comic book with a mini comic book as the text in some cases. And that's really amazing and also really challenging.
Well, that's the thing is I would have to find an artist.
Yeah.
That's the part of the collaborate part that I actually enjoy. That's why I brought a graphic novel idea to this, because I think from this, if this gets out and anybody sees it and whatever, they're like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. I would love to work on something like that. Like, okay. But yeah, it's a daunting task, but I think makes it more interesting. Nothing easy is worth doing, I guess. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like it's like to stand out in a market like this, you have to have some interesting visual flair, and you have to have either that or a powerful story.
Yep.
Like you just
and
have to
really
have
both.
Heart punch of a story. And if you can bring both of them, I mean, Jesus Christ, but I hope to at least bring, a little bit of something, at least a cool story. It's an open-ended kind of book, a deal where it's like any kind of artist can pick it up. Any kind of person can tell whatever story they want to do. Like I'd love to create this book and create and just get a first 12 issues and then hand it to somebody else and be like, look, here's the character. This is his situation. He's lost his memory. Now you get to fucking have a character who's lost his memory and this is his circumstances. And then you write from there, Like I see writing a arc where maybe if we did it for like 50 issues and then in the 50th issue, he walks out into the woods and you hand the book over to somebody else and say, here, write this, enjoy this character. And he just picks it up. It's a guy who's lost his memory in the woods, doesn't know who he is, all the same circumstances, but, gets to tell his completely own story.
Clean slate. You don't have to worry about honoring the backstory.
Yeah. Well, there are things that 100% have happened to him. And anybody who does a narrative story definitely has to honor whatever has come before, if you're doing straight from the narrative, I guess, but you get to tell your own story of what you want to do with them. You don't have to be beholden to just sticking to what that last narrative was. You can take it and be like, all right, well, this is this guy's next part of the story. And he doesn't have to be this office worker. He can be whatever I decide to take him into, just randomly fall into being a fucking baseball star or something. I don't know. However, whatever. That's just, whatever into your head. It's just I think it's a cool slate for a character that you could keep going on, where it's he's immortal and kind of a blank slate character.
It's hugely inspiring to me. I mean, I love the idea. There's this piece of me that's craving, and I don't even necessarily want you to talk about it, but there is a part of me that's craving to know, I want to know the roots. I want to know the history. I want to know the past. I want to eventually get the payoff of like, who is this guy? But I love what you're doing with it. And like I said, I don't want you to go there unless you absolutely know. And that's where you're going with this. But
he is almost in a sense like the missing link. Something happens at the dawn of history, or the dawn of like animals and humans, where he touches a meteorite and fucking becomes this thing, this thing that just, he can't die. Like, you cut off his head and you bury him, he grows his head, and 10 days later he's a human again and has no memory of whatever happened. It's just this thing,
Okay.
And, throughout history, he's mostly bumbled through history. I've been I never want to see him as like the main character of a story in a sense. Unless it's his own story. He's only the main character of his own story. But in a historical sense, he's only ever at best a side character in a historical sense, where he's like, he's the guy who works in the manger of the pharaoh, or the dude who's been whatever. He's never discovered on his thing, because honestly, a person who doesn't have memory and is just trying to piece together himself time after time after time probably wouldn't be like as useful and smart immediately recognizably. Like, I see different stories that you could tell where it's like he gets exploited throughout history. Maybe there's like parts of like lost history where you can insert him into lost history, where he did profound things in lost history, and then they're like, oh well, all that shit's gone and so are you. But
I knew you had stories. That's the funny thing. We've talked about it before in different times that we've hung out and worked together. I mean, that's how we're connected, is through work. But I knew you had stories. I didn't know you had a story like this. This is a dynamite story. This is such a cool idea, and it has such a big potential. I know you know that. You're telling it because you know what a big deal it is. It's really cool. I so much hope that somebody who's got some really strong art capabilities can come and draw this for you. I hope it gets bigger than this podcast, to tell you the truth. I mean, but shoot, I love it. A couple of things I want to mention that I kind of put in the back of my brain is, I don't know how much of a Stephen King fan you are, but going all the way back to the dog, it reminds me of the Dark Tower series. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, I'm a little bit like tangentially, just because I've read enough Stephen King and I'm enough of a nerd to know about it.
Okay, well, first read the Dark Tower series because it's such a good series. All 7 books are really dynamite. I think the first is the worst, and they just keep getting better. I can't remember the name of the dog type character in there, but it really reminded me of the dog in your story, of where it has almost this sense of like agency, but it's this safe character to put an imprint on, and it gives you this relief, this situation, almost like a priest or something, a confessional kind of character. But since you haven't read it, I'm really just giving you that as check it out.
No, I feel you. I think people connect to animals.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, since the fucking dawn of humanity, we've literally connected to dogs or some type of animal. We don't have pets for no reason, and we don't have pets because we want to lord over them. I think it's that idea of like that another creature could love you. That's a profound feeling, man.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not just another person, but it's just this random, simple creature that's like, yeah, but I love you, buddy.
And it's weird that people debate it. Sometimes I wonder, anybody who's debating whether an animal can love you or not must have never owned an animal, or must not have been that animal's person. Because we've got 3 animals in this house. We had 4. Unfortunately, my wife's animal, the one that was her animal that loved her, he's gone, but I've still got my love. Yeah, I know. And it's, if you've had it,
Yeah. Like if you've ever had a cat purr on you, really, and not just like purr on you, but just like nestle up on you and be like, dude, you're my bro. Just going to sit here and purr and just like, oh yeah, this is the shit.
Yep.
That's for sure, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the other one that kind of came to me again is actually on Stephen King. And if you haven't read it, totally fine. But he has this character that keeps coming back. Randall Flagg is in The Stand. If you've read The Stand. Okay. So the character of Flagg, or his iteration, keeps coming back and back and back throughout all of Stephen King's novels. And I feel like that's a little bit where you're going, except you've taken like the walking dude, the evil guy, and you've turned him into almost a force of good, or at least a force of neutrality. Like you said, the missing link. That's, I mean, it's really cool that I feel like you're tapping into this similar vein.
I like the idea of having my character, of that character, exist in other things that I do. Like if I ever did anything else, you know, of just as he's another character who does a thing. I really like Kurt Vonnegut, like really inspired by Kurt Vonnegut in a lot of ways. And he has a lot of reoccurring characters.
Yes. Yeah. What's the novelist? Kilgore. Yeah. Kilgore Trout.
Yeah. Kilgore Trout rolls through a lot of his books, and that's a cool thing. Or Rosewater, Mr. Rosewater is in there too. It's a cool concept because it's like you can loosely connect things together, where stories that have nothing to do with each other can have something to do with each other and have this like neat shared universe, you know. That's comic books in a nutshell, a neat shared universe. Yeah. You know, suddenly fucking Spider-Man shows up in your Iron Man book and your mind is blown as a 6-year-old, where you're like, Spider-Man's in this?
So why is that? Because I agree with you. I mean, it's not any secret to people who know me at all, but I write. And every single novel I write, I always have a shared character, whether it's a minor character who jumps into the novel for like 2 lines, or it's a major character who plays a side role in a future book. Why do we want that? Why do we want that connected universe?
It's because, I mean, you write multiple things, you know, like it's a nod to other things, you know, it's just this, maybe it's like Easter eggs, you know, it's a writer's way of putting an Easter egg into something. It's your own inside joke, you know, or your own inside little thing of like, if you know, you know, and if somebody else knows, they know. And then they can have a little laugh about this of like, I mean, just simple as that. It's whatever, you know? And, you know, we like the idea of honestly, I think humans like the idea of getting like secrets in a bigger universe out there, where you're like, oh, he's in this. Well, then if I read these other things, are all these things connected? Does all these things have the same, like something going on in them? I don't know. People like a good mystery and a good kind of something to discover.
Yeah. And it feels like this even bigger sense of there really is connectivity. There's connectivity between the story you're telling and the story I'm telling and the story of the next guest on this podcast. It's almost like we're all tapping into the same vein, telling the same story in a weird way. And yet, you know, somebody may listen to our podcast and hear the language that you use and the way that you use it and be like, well, that guy, you know, he's using this particular kind of language that's offensive to me. And somebody else may take it so much further. Listen, the reason I bring it up is because that's what the whole purpose of doing this is that we're telling the same story in this really powerful, different way. I'm curious. I mean, you feel that way a little bit, right? Or what's your thought about that?
Yeah, no, I say this on the regular, and people are like, haha, but they're like, hey, how you feeling today? I'm like, magical, you know? And it used to be, I'm feeling the magic of the universe slowly coalesce and expand in ways that's hard to understand, much less put the words. That's the short end of it. That's the real thing, though. And that's a fucking true fact. It's the magic of the universe, my friend. Like, we are connected in ways that are fucking, like, profoundly hard to understand, much less put to words. It's no joke, man. Like, that universal consciousness is a real thing. I do believe we're all connected in these weird ways. If only in like, I believe we're connected on wavelengths, my friend.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking a thought, I'm creating electrical signal in my brain, right? Like that's a true fact. I'm creating there's some type of weird electrical signal shit going on in my brain. And if there's an electrical signal going on in my brain, it's creating an electrical wavelength. And there's probably a really good chance that if you're thinking the same thought, you're creating the same fucking wavelength with your brain with electrical signals. Like, there's a good chance that those wavelengths are fucking super similar or the same. The idea that we're on the same wavelength isn't just a fucking, like, you know,
cliche.
Like, yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
no, you're literally on the same wavelength. When we connect right now, like, we're connecting through waves. When we connect, even as human beings, we're occupying the same wave space as we circle and create a time wave. As a circle, you know, going through time creates a wave. If we're revolving around the earth in the same spot, we're creating the same wave. You know what I mean? Like, it is waves, man. I believe that we all kind of, you know, exist in these wavelengths, and that we can connect through those wavelengths. We can only observe so much because we're only, you know, capable of observing so much, but we are able of comprehending so much more through those observations. You know, over time, I think we'll find ways to connect on wavelengths that are fucking beyond our concept of what we're even doing right now. Like,
I don't think so at all. I think I love what you're saying, and I agree. And for me, what it means to me is, there's this part of me. I was like, I wish so bad that I just had money to throw at things. So I'd fly you out here, and we would sit in my office right now and have this conversation face to face, because there's something you can't replace about face to face. And yet, what's really surprising to me is that just talking over Zoom right now, like, this is just like it was when we met up at TA in Council Bluffs and worked a store together. You know, it's strange. And that's what you're talking about with waves, is like, you and I are having this conversation from, I'll shoot in the dark, 450 miles apart. And, you know, at the same time, like, feels like we're in the same room in so many ways. That's pretty cool.
No, it's dude, that's so fucking neat. You know, it's like the wildness of what technology has allowed for us to do, of like, not just technology, of just smart ass people figured out a way for us to do this shit. It's just some real smart people who are like, hey, you know, it'd be cool if we could do this. And they're like, yeah, let's figure that out.
Yeah.
It's neat. You know,
and it's also funny that this same conversation, if it's my, you know, great aunt 3 times removed, I'm not enjoying this conversation the same way, because the waves are the same. It's like,
you know, like, you can connect those things, and you're like, you know, visually seer and all those things. But yeah, if you're not thinking the same stuff, then you're still not going to have a conversation. Or if you can't connect on any of those other ways, you know, it's a weird thing, but you're right.
Yeah. Strange. So, you know, coming back to the story a little bit, we've got this idea of maybe an indefinite number of issues, but you're kind of thinking, if I remember right, 50 issues or so, and then you pass it off to somebody else. How do you see the whole evolution of this? And what's so freeing about that idea that you can give it away?
I like the idea of, like, hey, I like the idea that I would be successful enough with this book that I could give it away to somebody else. Sure. And somebody else be able to write it and do whatever. You know, that's just an ego trip. But we don't own what we create. You don't. Yeah. If you create it and you give it out to the world, you have now given it to the world. You no longer own it. Those people who read it, your readers, they own it now. You know, like, if I buy a book, I fucking own that book. However I interpret that book, that's how I interpret it now.
Careful.
You know, that's my book.
Be careful, because you are pretty much going against the entire system when you say that. I mean, that, like, everything that we're talking about right now, and I hate to go hot topic on it, but own voices. I mean, you don't own it. You didn't live that story.
Well, in this sense of, like, this book right here, I own this book.
Yep.
You know, and however I read this book is how I interpret this book. Like, that's how that works now, you know, like, no matter what story you write, you know, as soon as it comes out and puts out, it's whoever reads it, that's how they interpret it. That's, they own, whoever reads it now, that's who owns it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I like the idea of creating a character and saying, you know what, the world owns this character now. It's not just my character. You know, I don't have to be like the sole proprietor of the stories of this character, like Harry Potter. Okay. I think anybody should be able to write a fucking Harry Potter story and do whatever they want with it.
Yeah.
I don't think J.K. Rowling has the best Harry Potter stories. I don't think, I mean, I don't think Stan Lee has the best Spider-Man stories. I think he had some great Spider-Man stories. He definitely, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee definitely created Spider-Man, and Steve Ditko. There's three together, 100% created it. But do they have the best stories? No, somebody else has some great Spider-Man stories to tell. Just some absolutely heartbreaking stories, I like being like the idea of like, hey, I created this thing. It's out there. I'll be forever associated with it, but somebody else can possibly do something with it that's just amazing. You know what I mean? And why would I want to stifle anybody from that? Why would I want to stop somebody from realizing their potential if I can help them get to their potential? Like, I have 100 ideas for Superman books and Spider-Man books and Batman books all the time of like, oh, that would be cool and that'd be neat to write. And I don't think it'd be horrible for anybody to write those books, write those stories,
Yeah.
Fan fiction is wonderful shit. I don't necessarily read a ton of fan fiction because most of it's probably not that great, but hey man, do it.
I love that you say that. And I love even the way that you qualify, like fan fiction is probably not that great. I tend to agree with you. I have not encountered a ton of specifically fan fiction that's that great. And yet everything that we write is inspired by something else that we've read, watched, or listened to. That there's no way around it, is that everything is fan fiction. And I think that the beauty of what you're discussing right now is that comics figure this out and the rest of the world has not figured it out yet. I mean, Ta-Nehisi Coates just wrote Black Panther, right? I mean, this guy who is and if you haven't read those issues, he's a journalist for The Atlantic. I mean, he is on the cutting edge of discussions about race. And yet he jumps into the skin of Black Panther and writes some pretty kick-ass stories. I think Roxane Gay is another one that, she's lived her whole life in this sort of literary cocoon. And then she jumps out of that and writes a Marvel comic book. I think she might have collaborated with Ta-Nehisi. I can't remember for sure, but it's this sense of like anybody can write fan fiction in the comic book world and do some amazing things.
Yeah. I mean, with the superhero stuff, is fun because it's like the particularly superhero books have figured out that they're like, oh yeah, have figured that out. Have just like, they're like, people want more stories, people, they don't just want the character. They want more stories with the character. I don't know why other books haven't I guess, I don't know, like novels, people feel weird about ownership a lot of times, with something that they create, I get that. I get the idea of like wanting to keep your baby, but I don't know. I see with some things of like, there are some places where it'd be like, no, this would be a great idea to just let the world have this, if it means that the world's going to be, if it means that it would make the world a kind of cooler, better place, fuck, like that's all I would want in the world, to just be known of like, oh yeah, you made this thing that made the world cooler. Or like, awesome.
It's so funny. It's almost like I paid you to say this, because this is really at the heart of what Create Collaborate is all about. Is it's getting people to have a discussion who are open to the idea of sharing their story. And maybe somebody listening right now has this idea based on your idea, but it's not the same. And they go out and write it and they might not even give you credit. And that would be a horrible thing, except you're exactly right. It makes the world a better place, because this is a amazing story. It's a great story. And I don't know. It's so cool.
Appreciate you, man. I really do. Appreciate you a lot.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of transitioning outside of that story, I know that you have a ton of stories. What for you is the most impactful medium right now? Do you feel like it's comic books? Do you feel like it's movies? Where do you see things moving?
Well, I still read a lot of comics, but man, I think media like movies and TV, and really, I think serialized movies is going to be the next kind of re-step. Makes sense. That's kind of where we came from, is like serialized film of like, where like, we'd had movies that were like 14 parts. I see us doing stuff like that way more often, of like, because I think we want a bigger story. People are willing to sit in their homes and watch those bigger stories and watch those longer things and pay the money for it,
Mm-hmm.
And you're not necessarily tied into having to make a movie 2 hours because you're locked into a theater model. I think, and that really, and comic books really influenced the hardcore part of this, because all those comic films made so much money. Even the ones that fail make so much money,
Yep.
Like Aquaman was considered, like, people seriously considered Aquaman like a failure of a movie, and it made $2 billion. Like, it just is, so like, but they saw that kind of narrative storytelling
Mm-hmm.
works, that you can tell a 4 hour, you can tell an 8-hour story over months. You know what I mean? And people will keep turning in and tuning in. Check it out. You don't have to be stuck to a TV model either.
Right.
You can go big film, but do it like 6-hour films. I see a real big change coming up. I think a lot more people are going to really tap into that. Like I said, long form narrative. And on the very opposite end, not like, it's like for like storytelling and big storytelling, that for everything else is going to clip down to 5 minutes tops, because nobody, like, it's like, if it isn't, like, if you aren't locked into a story, it's all maybe 30 seconds. It's all TikTok.
Totally.
Like, you're going to find people taking those kind of like that kind of medium, that short medium, and finding ways to tell cool stories with that. It's still a fresh medium. It really is. Like Vines and TikToks and that short form video, like where everybody has that. It's really, really, really quite brand new. Even if it feels old, even if like our sense of time is skewed,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Where it's like, oh, TikTok's been around for a couple years now, but it's like, yeah, it's only been around for a couple years now.
Nothing gets good for a couple of years. That's kind of the basis of it. Is in one sense, I'm like, I really desperately want a lot of people to hear your take, because one, you have a great story. Two, you're just really good to engage in conversation with. You've got a special gift of gab, honestly, and it's awesome to be around. But the truth is that unfortunately, you're going to get buried for a little while. A lot of people aren't going to unfortunately hear this for a little while until things start gaining steam. And it's going to take a couple of years of doing create, collaborate to get there. But the awesome thing is you're one of the early ones, and everybody goes back to the beginning. So I think that's cool too.
Right. It's fun. And I'll always enjoy talking no matter what. So, I'll have that, I'll always enjoy the sound of my own voice.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too, for sure. It's crazy. I just got a message from my computer that said my disk is almost full. I don't know what happens if we go over the point where my disk is full. I have an external hard drive I can plug in later, but I wonder if I keep recording past that point, do I lose all of this? Do we throw the dice and just keep running, or what do we do?
I think this is a good stopping point, man.
Awesome.
I think this is a good place for us to call, because I think the universe telling us that, finding a natural place for this conversation to end, because there is a certain amount of me blathering on endlessly that people can fucking listen to and stomach, or they're just like, all right, dude, get over yourself. You're fucking clearly full of shit.
It's funny is there's a billion times that I've been so busy that I've been like, I got to jump off the phone for whatever reason. But this conversation stands out to me as being one of the most important things that I've talked about in a long time. And I feel really privileged that I got to do it, because you've got really cool ideas, and I don't want you to minimize that or make small of that. Hopefully the selfish part of me says, like, I hope that I get to help you tell this story in a way that we get to publish it, and that it makes you a celebrity and rich, because I really think that your story is great. But regardless, just awesome to talk to you.
Dude, I appreciate you, man. I think you're awesome. Let me say, I think we all have great ideas, and I think we all have these ideas and all these kind of thoughts inside our heads. I think we're all just looking for a way to verbalize and say it, to put it out there. And I've done enough stupid things to myself where I just don't give a fuck. And be like, all right, well, let's just have this verbal word diarrhea happen and see what happens there. You know, see if somebody buys some of this.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man. It was great talking, and we'll keep in touch. All right.
All right, man. Hey, man. Awesome. Have a great one. Be safe out there, my friend.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Ryan. Take care. Thank you for listening to TRBM. The theme music was provided by the ever-talented Christopher Talon. And hey, if you liked what you heard, share this show with other readers, because what's the point of telling stories if nobody's listening?